All right. Hello, everyone. All right. And go ahead and get started here. Welcome to our session, Developing Collaborations. Want to go ahead and introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Tamara Holmes Brothers. Dr. Tamara Holmes Brothers is the Deputy Director of the North Carolina Arts Council. In her role, Dr. Brothers designs, develops, and implements agency programs, agency diversity, equity, access, inclusion efforts, policies, and the strategic plan, as well as provides executive level support to the agency's director. In addition to her experience as the Director of Development and Major Gifts at the Nasher Museum of Art, Dr. Brothers worked as Director of Corporate and Foundation Relations, where she led development efforts and played a central role in achieving the university's capital campaign goals. Dr. Brothers is a native of Fayetteville, North Carolina, and has a bachelor's degree in art and a Ph.D. from Hampton University. Her dissertation at Hampton focused on the potential of arts integration to help students learn more effectively. She also has a master's degree in sport management from West Virginia University, a certificate in historic preservation from the University of South Carolina at Greensboro, a certificate in art as an alternate investment from Sotheby Art Institute, and a certificate in nonprofit management from Duke University. So we are more than thrilled to have her with us today. So thank you so much, Dr. Tamara, to be with us today. And I'm going to go ahead and just a few housekeeping rules for those who have entered in. We just ask that you do stay muted during the presentation. We do have a moment for question and answers at the end. If you do have a question throughout the presentation, please do put that in the chat. Today's session is recorded, and we do have closed captions available, and you can implement those by clicking the closed caption at the bottom of your screen. All right, without further ado, please take it away, Dr. Brothers.
Thank you so much for having me this evening, and thank you all for joining us today. If you can go ahead and pull up the presentation. So as we're thinking about DEAI, diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion programming in the arts, we'd like to consider that accountability depends on transparency. It demands transparency, and transparency demands accountability. This belief is central to all of our work now more than ever, not just for the sake of it being trending, because this is ongoing work. It should be a part of not just our DNA, but a part of our lifestyle as well. So today's presentation, I'll briefly discuss the North Carolina Arts Council's self-reflected journey towards equity in the arts. And I hope that today's conversation, and we'll have questions at the end of this discussion, encourages you to be intentional in creating arts for all people. Next slide, please. So who are we? The North Carolina Arts Council was created in 1967 with a mission of arts for all people. In the 1970s and 80s, many new arts nonprofits were created in the state. Relatively few were organizations of color led by leaders of color. So in 1989 and 90, discussions with African American and Native American arts leaders revealed funding inequities regarding grant allocations. The North Carolina Arts Council responded by creating two specific initiatives. A multicultural requirement for a grassroots arts program, which asks our grassroots partners to spend a percentage of their allotment on programming reflecting diverse cultures. This requirement was enacted in 1990 and is still a requirement today. The other initiative was Organizations of Color Development Program, which was active from 1990 through 2010. The goal of the program was to help stabilize and grow a cohort of diverse organizations to grow equity in North Carolina's art network. Most organizations did not see significant growth, and the number of those organizations funded steadily declined. This could have been due to a number of things, one of which is the nonprofit model is less sustainable in communities with less resources. So this is something that we've been mindful of even now as we are continuing to do this work. Next slide. So I was appointed, actually today is my 3-year anniversary. So at the height of the pandemic, when everything was completely shut down and we were working remotely. So a part of my role specifically, again, is looking at the effectiveness of DEAI work internally and externally overall within the North Carolina Arts Council. So when we began, wanted to develop some type of DEAI plan. So I'll go through a couple of phases. We had 3 phases overall, and to give you a brief overview, and you'll have access to this presentation also after today. So why a DEAI plan? It's an opportunity for each of our teams individually and within the institution to collectively articulate and highlight current work happening to foster an environment of greater inclusion and respect, and to develop those goals for a more equitable future. So we took a lot of time to have those initial conversations. So you'll see, as a part of this first goal, the initiative was internal. So again, at the height of the pandemic, when everyone was shuttered in place and the George Floyd protests were taking place, our office is literally in between the legislative building and the governor's mansion. And quite a few of our staff members lived in the downtown Raleigh area. So there are a lot of heightened emotions added on to what everyone saw on TV. They were hearing it outside of their homes. So we had a lot of internal, intimate conversations to see how our staff were feeling. Not just about the world today, but about the work that they wanted to see done within the North Carolina Arts Council. So we began this internal work with a commitment to acknowledge and to learn. So we committed to listening, which transformed relationships and deepened our overall understanding. And this is a skill that requires practice and discipline. I'll repeat it again. It requires practice and discipline. So even as adults, we can be teachable even in this age group, right? So we want to be mindful of that, and that it also demonstrates respect, concern, and also allows us to be receptive to feedback as well. So if you look lower in goal 2 and looking at the external part of this initial phase, we did receive a letter from a specific group, the North Carolina Black Artists for Liberation. And they actually challenged us with specific items to do in our work, from hiring vendors of color, contractors, hiring people of color. I'm the first person of color in senior leadership in the history of the institution. So again, our organization was founded and created in 1967. 67 was the year before integration. And now I was appointed in 2020. So it took that long for someone of color to come into senior leadership, and this organization having a call to action for continued work with an overall equity lens. So we received this response letter, and we responded to it as a call to act. And we did post that electronically to the sector as well. So in signing that along with the executive director, I did mention, I said, okay, we have this charge and we have to be mindful of it. I'm not going to be tokenized in my position. So we have to be committed and transparent in what we say we're going to do. So I often use that letter as a reference tool to continue having friendly reminders, even now, to continue this work. Next slide, please. So we're looking at this continuation of phase 1, and it happened over quite a bit of time. In equity work, we can't afford to be neutral. We can't even afford to simply be good people. We have to be intentional people, listening at a scale to be better leaders in the field, acknowledging what we have to, and leading with empathy, patience, and impact, while utilizing curiosity to learn what our constituents want. So in having some training internally within our Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, there is a DEAI office So there is that charge across the department, not just within our division of the North Carolina Arts Council. There's this charge of being mindful of DEAI work across the board, from the arts to the zoo. So being in contact with Tracy Burns, who is our deputy secretary for DEAI, and she suggested connecting with someone who was in our Office of State HR, Regina Streety. So I connected with them often and still have meetings with Deputy Secretary Burns on a regular basis. We have standing meetings to discuss what's taking place, not just within our agency, but within the department as well. So again, having these initial conversations back in 2020, and it's still continuing now, ensuring that our staff has training, but also looking at having conversations externally as well. So when we're looking at Goal 4, opportunities for diverse artists and organizations. So inviting community members virtually to tell us who they are and what they like to see, as opposed to us making assumptions and guessing what we think we should be doing. We went straight to those cultural groups and invited them to have conversations with us, to share their thoughts and desires of what they'd like to see within the arts across the state of North Carolina. Next slide. So again, this evolution of acknowledgement first and active listening taking place, delving deeper with these individuals and having a trusted environment to understand what is affecting them. It also takes time to engage with people at multiple levels. So this isn't anything that's immediate, it's still taking place. This is ongoing work. And I often have to say this repetitively because it has to be a reminder. Some people want this immediate gratification, and this work is eternal. It has to take place every day and not just in training sessions. Again, it has to become a part of the lifestyle. So if you do it at home, you do it at work as well. Almost like what your parents tell you, right, growing up. But having this quote here from the state poet laureate, Jackie Shelton Green, she's the first African-American woman to be appointed by the governor as the state poet laureate. And she notes that art is one way for people to examine, dismantle, take apart, rip open the seams, and find where the truth will set them free. And she actually is in the second term of her appointment. So her appointment was extended to a second term. So we were so grateful to have someone of her caliber, her expertise and talent to share her gifts, not just across the state, but internationally as well. Next slide. So looking at the phase 2 and listening to others, I mentioned us having some of those external conversations, but going internally again, looking at our North Carolina Arts Council board, having conversations with the North Carolina Arts Foundation, our staff, again, our Department of Natural and Cultural Resources leadership, continuing this DEAI work. So we even had, we have actually 2 DEI consultants on our board, the North Carolina Arts Council board. And in the early phase of my appointment, we had one of those board members to conduct training with our board as well. So presenting our overall DEAI plan to our board as well as our constituents, making sure that everyone is on one accord as we're moving along and navigating this journey within this work, and making sure that there's an overall understanding, cohesive understanding of the work that is to be conducted. And in the second goal, externally, having those conversations again, as I mentioned, with groups and having those meetings with artists and organizations of color and constituent groups to share the data that we gathered and preliminary recommendations and getting feedback. When I started at the Arts Council, there were comments and feedback being made, oh, we work with organizations of color, but coming from a higher education background, specifically within the state government, we have to have data, right? That documentation. So I inquired about that documentation. So the research was completed that was begun before the pandemic took place. And the numbers showed, yes, they had done some work, but there's still more work to be done. And in one of the other slides, I'll mention some of that intentional work that was in response of, not just in response, but restorative work that took place as we saw that data and the lack of allocation support to organizations of color, specifically with leaders of color. Next slide. So in having those initial conversations, active listening I mentioned, we had a BIPOC Arts Equity Forum, and that was a safe space initiative. We had some of our colleagues that weren't of the BIPOC community inquire about participating. So that was an opportunity for me to share what a safe space was. And we invited members from the BIPOC community, from our staff, our board, North Carolina Arts Council board, as well as the board members for the North Carolina Arts Foundation, and had sent out the information across the sector, and individual artists and leaders of color that were over organizations, arts organizations across the state, were invited to this safe space. And even myself being in this forum, simply listened, only responded at the end of the conversation because we wanted the voices to be heard and didn't want those constituents to have a fear of retaliation or power authority simply with being present in that space, and bringing in a neutral facilitator to moderate that conversation. So we actually had 2 of these sessions and brought back that feedback to our board members as well as to our overall staff so that they still felt included in this conversation. So again, learning from our constituents and active listening, again, sometimes being quiet and being respectful of what was shared, even if we didn't like what was being shared. We had to listen because this was the lived experience of our constituents, and we wanted to be respectful of that. And a lot of those conversations and comments that were made are a reflection of the work that you'll see today. Next slide. So our third phase of the DEAI plan, synthesizing a draft strategic plan. So throughout this strategic plan, having talks with our staff, our board members, constituents, our directors of arts councils, and those within our arts learning communities, as well as other arts programs, listening to them, getting a lot of feedback and integrating that into our strategic plan. And I put the link at the bottom of the screen so you could go directly to that, and making sure that some type of diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion was incorporated throughout each strategy within that plan. It was not to be a checklist. Yes, we had that as the leading goal of our strategic plan, but in some form or fashion is integrated within each strategy of that overall plan. Next slide. So the Arts Council, in recognizing that the state's diverse population and striving to provide a representative portion of grant funds for arts programming that reflected the racial and ethnic diversity of the state, looking first and foremost, what is equity in philanthropy? Equity involves understanding and giving people what they need to enjoy full and healthy lives. How do we ensure that equitable grant-making efforts are practiced within the arts and within cultural communities? So looking at building social change requires funding to become more equitable. This means making the least burdensome pathways to dollars available to the most marginalized communities and the organizations that serve them. So again, being intentional about guidelines and criteria to panels. We're going back to pre-pandemic panels now. During the height of the pandemic, we simplified grant applications because it was a burden that everyone was shuttered in place. And again, the arts was the last sector to reopen within the state economy. So we wanted to be mindful of just overall operating support. So everything shifted to supporting operating support and not having that match during that phase of sheltering in place prior to the sector reopening. So being intentional about those barriers that took place, and also considering fiscal agency. That was something that we heard in that forum. A lot of organizations don't want to have that nonprofit status. So again, that's a barrier that we had as a state agency. So affording opportunities to have a fiscal sponsor, that was something that was introduced as well. Next slide. So talking about intentionality, we received some CARES funding from South Arts stimulus grant for organizations of color, but we wanted to take it a step further, not just giving to organizations of color, but giving funds to organizations of color that were led by people of color. So through that process, we had intimate conversations. We had maybe 2 months worth of conversations with community leaders just to hear what their needs were again. And we were able to fund 17 new organizations of color that had never applied for grant funding with the North Carolina Arts Council. So we were given $100,000 to distribute on an average of a little over 5,000 and then a median of $7,500. So we were excited to work in this capacity, specifically in response and doing that restorative work that we knew that we needed to do and still need to conduct. Next slide. So this is just a visual of the representation from the grants recipients. When we're giving grant allocations, we want to be mindful of not just the gender, race of our applicants, but the geographic locations as well, making sure that the funding is spread across the state, because if our mission is arts for all people, we want to be mindful that we are being strategic and intentional about the impact of these funds for the betterment of the state. So this is just a visual of that. So looking at that, we also included, it was from art galleries at HBCUs. North Carolina has the most 4-year accredited HBCUs in the country. We have 11, well, 10 that are accredited, one that is working on their reaccreditation. So we're very proud of that. And we wanted to ensure that they were being included in this funding support as well. So just looking at the overall scope and the focus of the communities that we serve. Next slide, please. Spark the arts. So during the pandemic, we wanted to be proactive in preparation of coming back into the economy, and developed a marketing campaign that reinforced the arts sector as it rebounded during and from the pandemic. Sparking the arts was crucial to economic and social recovery of our communities across the state. So this was actually a campaign during the fall of 21 throughout 22. And again, these were some of the initiatives that took place, and I'll show you some more specific information about these two campaigns in the slides to come. Next slide. So starting with the Arts Equity Project Grant, this particular opportunity was designed to support arts projects that benefit communities of color, disability communities, and rural communities. So we awarded 47 organizations with the funding support, and this proved to be, of course, very intentional about the criteria and the eligibility for this opportunity, and making sure that it supported projects with an equity lens, if you will. Next slide. And again, this gives you a visual of that funding allocation, again, being mindful from the mountains to the Outer Banks, excuse me, in that overall distribution. Next slide. So our Spark the Arts, we began this in 22, but we broke that into two opportunities. This is a result of the first grant cycle, and we're actually in the active process of grant panels in the second phase of this initiative. So we awarded 130 grants for this particular category, and awarded $2.5 million overall for this opportunity, which was specific to audience re-engagement as the sector, of course, reopened again, and also audience inclusion. So we're actively in the process, excuse me, of evaluating grant applications for that. And what we did add this go around is an opportunity for our panelists to be mindful about implicit bias. So being mindful in how we identified our panelists, again, geographic location, art discipline, because we wanted our reviewers to be reflective of the applications that we received, but also being mindful of inclusive language as they provide their remarks in their scoring and in their communication during the adjudication process as well. So this is something that's new to us in regards to implicit bias panel process as well. Next slide. And this is a visual of the funding allocation for this particular grant category. And we had 209 applicants for this particular cycle. Again, this was part one. Part two, we received 220 applications. So it's quite a bit. So we have a total of 5 panels for this one grant category. And we go to our third panel tomorrow. So please keep us in your prayers as we have a few more to go. Next slide. So again, the North Carolina Arts Council, we recognize that we have to go beyond allyship. This is a time for action in becoming accomplices. What you've seen are just some of the actions that we have done to empower our communities, and want to encourage you to be mindful about how you're conducting your work, how you're communicating your work, and how you're working together as well as colleagues.